never thought the child I raised with my whole heart would be the one to question my sanity, or try to take everything my late wife and I built. It started with a quiet moment in my kitchen, a signature she said was just paperwork. I should have known better. Families break not in storms, but in whispers. If any part of my story touches your own, feel free to share it and subscribe for more stories like this. I woke to the quiet hum of my old house in Atlanta, the same softness that had greeted me every morning since my wife passed. I moved through the kitchen out of habit, setting out 2 mugs even though I only needed 1. It was a ritual I couldn't shake. Her mug stayed spotless on the shelf, but reaching for it reminded me that once someone shared this space with me. Bacon sizzled while I whisked a couple of eggs, the motions steadying my breath. I used to cook louder, humming whatever came to mind, because she said the sound made the house feel alive. Now I cooked gently, as if anything sharper than a whisper might break the thin shield around my mornings. The front door opened without a knock. My daughter, Raven, strode in with the kind of urgency people use when trouble is theirs, but consequences belong to someone else. "Dad, we need to handle some paperwork today." Her voice clipped each word, as if the air owed her something. She dropped a stack of documents on the table next to my plate. Folders, printouts, little sticky notes marking places she wanted me to sign. "Your finances are a mess. I've been talking to someone who can organize things. You just need to authorize it." I set my fork down. "Raven, we've talked about this. I'm managing fine." "No, you're not. Look at this." She flipped pages with the impatience of someone swatting flies. Her perfume lingered behind each motion, sharp and insistent. "You're forgetting bills. You're late on insurance. You don't track your accounts. Let me do this. It's not that hard." A long breath slipped from me before I meant it to. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm not signing anything today." She stiffened, her jaw tightening. "Why do you always make simple things difficult? Mum wouldn't have tolerated this kind of stubbornness." That hit harder than I let show. I rose slowly from my chair, steadying myself with a hand on the counter. "Leave your mother out of this, Raven." But she was already moving down the hallway, ignoring every boundary she'd been raised with. My bedroom door swung open without hesitation. Drawers slid, papers rustled. She didn't even pretend to ask permission. I followed her, standing in the doorway while she dug through folders I kept in a wooden box beside the bed. It wasn't locked. I'd never needed locks in my own home. "Raven, stop." "I'm trying to help you, Dad. You don't keep anything where it should be." Her irritation filled the room like humidity before a storm. I watched her take my property tax folder, my bank statements, even a copy of the will my wife and I updated years ago. She stuffed them into her tote bag without looking at me. Something in my chest pressed upward, the kind of pressure that comes before anger. But anger felt heavy, and I'd learned to lay heavy things down instead of carrying them. "You can't just take whatever you want." "Then sign the papers. I wouldn't have to fix your messes if you cooperated." She brushed past me, the tote bag knocking lightly against my arm. I didn't move, not out of fear, just disbelief at how familiar her entitlement had become without my noticing. At the door, she paused long enough to toss me a look of thin disappointment. "I'll be back tomorrow. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Then she was gone, taking her noise with her. The house sagged back into silence.
walked onto the front porch and eased into the old wooden chair my wife used to paint every spring. The street was calm. A neighbour's dog barked in the distance. Atlanta mornings often carried a kind of warm haze, but that day it felt like the world had shifted 1 inch to the left, subtle enough that no one else would notice, sharp enough that my balance felt off. Raven had always been strong-willed, but today wasn't stubbornness. It was ownership. Over me. Over the life her mother and I had worked for. Somewhere along the years, she had stopped seeing me as a father and started seeing opportunities. Things to take, decisions to correct, spaces to occupy. The chair creaked as I leaned back. My hands rested on my knees, steady but tense. The quiet around me wasn't comforting. It stretched wide, swallowing everything I didn't say. The kind of silence that doesn't protect anything. It just erases the person who keeps choosing it. A small gust pushed fallen leaves along the porch steps. I watched them slide, scatter, then settle again in new places. Change comes like that, I thought. Quiet first, then movement you don't expect. Then nothing looks the same. I rose slowly, feeling the stiffness in my knees as I pushed myself upright. Inside, the kitchen light still glowed over the untouched second mug. I stepped back into the house, closing the door behind me without letting it latch too hard, and walked toward the table where her folders had sat earlier. The morning had cracked open, and I felt the shift under my feet. I didn't know yet what it meant, only that something had begun, and it wasn't going to stop on its own. By the afternoon, the phone began ringing in ways that didn't feel natural. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in months called with voices dipped in sugar. "Hey Uncle Ray, just checking in. You doing all right over there?" Another one said, "If you ever feel confused about bills or anything, you know the younger generation can handle that stuff better now." None of them mentioned Raven directly, but every call carried her fingerprints. Someone had planted a story, and it spread with the quiet ease of gossip that pretends to be concern. I tried answering politely at first, respecting old family ties, but each conversation drifted toward the same script. "Maybe you shouldn't stress yourself so much. Let someone help you before something gets messed up. It's okay to admit when things get too complicated at your age." My age. People who once asked me for advice now spoke to me like I was fading from my own life. Neighbours picked up the pattern next. When I walked to the mailbox, Mrs. Collins paused her gardening just to stare a moment too long. No questions, only a sigh as if she'd discovered another crack in a wall she expected to collapse. Others waved with a softness that didn't match last week. Their kindness felt rehearsed, almost defensive, like they weren't greeting me, but the idea of an old man sliding downhill. I headed back toward my porch, wishing for the comfort it used to give, when I saw Angie standing on the walkway between our houses. She'd lived next door since before my kids were born. A straight-talking woman, retired nurse, good at reading people even when they thought they hid their feelings well. "Morning, Ray," she said, folding her arms. "Haven't seen you out much lately." "Just keeping busy, Angie." She studied my face longer than I liked. "Someone told me you've been forgetting things. I figured I'd come hear it from you." The ground seemed to tilt under that one sentence, not because she meant harm, but because the lie had reached her so quickly. "I'm fine," I told her. "Nothing wrong here." You look tired, though. Anything going on? I gave a small laugh, hoping it would steer the conversation away. Just life wearing on me, that's all. Angie didn't smile back. You know, you don't have to pretend with me. Her words pressed gently, but I felt cornered anyway.
I didn't want to open the door to my private trouble. Not while I was still trying to understand what was happening inside it. Appreciate you checking in, really, but I'm all right. She nodded slowly, accepting my answer, but not believing it. Well, I'm next door if you need anything, even if you think you don't. I thanked her, then stepped toward my porch, gripping the railing as if steadying myself from a sudden gust. Angie remained where she stood, watching me climb the steps. Her expression held more truth than any family member had offered all week. She sensed something wasn't right, but she wouldn't push until I opened the door myself. Inside, the rooms felt unfamiliar, as though they had shifted during the day. I moved through them, checking drawers and shelves, not for missing items, but to remind myself what still belonged to me. Raven's visit had unsettled the whole house. Places once filled with quiet comfort now stirred unease.
It was strange noticing how quickly a home changed when someone treated it like a place waiting to be taken. The phone buzzed again. This time, a message. Dad, please don't make things harder. Everyone agrees you should let me help. Everyone. The word tightened my breath. Another message followed. I talked to Aunt Teresa. She said you sounded confused last time. Confused. That wasn't the word they used when I raised them. Back then I was dependable, steady, someone they relied on. Now, one rumor had flipped the whole script. I set the phone face down on the counter. My appetite from breakfast had vanished. I poured a glass of water, held it a moment, then set it aside, untouched. Voices from earlier echoed faintly. Neighbours calling my name. Cousin suggesting I take it easy. Angie's careful question. The world hadn't turned against me. It simply shifted me into a smaller space. One where decisions would soon be made for me if I didn't guard my footing.
I walked toward the living room, passing the picture of my wife on the wall. Her smile felt steadier than anything else in the house. For a moment, I wanted to speak to her, ask what she'd make of our daughter's sudden mission, but the words stayed inside. Talking to a photograph wouldn't fix the erosion taking place around me. I sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on my knees, listening to the faint hum of traffic outside. The noise blended with the sound of Angie closing her screen door next door. Life moved on as if nothing had shifted, even though everything had begun to. A draft came through the window frame. I reached for the latch to close it, pausing when my hand brushed the wood. I stayed like that for a moment, letting the quiet settle around me again. Not the peaceful kind from earlier years, but a heavier version, crowded with thoughts I wasn't ready to say out loud. After a long breath, I stood and walked toward the hallway, unsure what I meant to do next, but unwilling to sit still any longer. The phone rang early, before I'd finished tightening the laces on my shoes. A man from the bank introduced himself, polite but cautious. Mr. Carter, we're calling to confirm the update you requested on your account permissions. His words settled strangely in my stomach. I didn't request any update, I said.
What exactly was changed? He hesitated long enough for me to picture him checking his screen again. It appears someone submitted a form last night to add a secondary manager to your accounts. We just need your verbal confirmation. My back stiffened. No confirmation, no changes. Lock everything until I come in. He apologized in that scripted way banks do, wished me a good day, and hung up. The silence that followed felt heavier than usual. Something had moved without my hand touching it, and that thought alone tightened my throat.
A knock sounded at the front door. When I opened it, I saw Denise, an old friend of my wife's, holding a pie. She hugged the dish to her chest like a shield. A pen rolled near the edge of my desk. Paper clips scattered near the chair legs. My photo with my wife, usually standing neat and centered, had been nudged forward. I checked the drawers. A few documents were out of order, not missing, just handled. Someone had been here. Someone who didn't care if I noticed, or assumed I wouldn't. When I sat down, the chair felt different, wrong somehow. I pulled the small metal box from beneath the desk, checked the contents, and returned it to its place. The unease in my spine swelled. Raven wasn't just taking papers anymore. She was rearranging a life she hadn't lived. I set new passwords on my accounts and changed the lock code on my study door. The clicking sound of each keypad button steadied me, small proof that something still belonged to me. Later that evening, I heard her key in the front door. She walked in fast, as if her footsteps had a deadline. "Dad, why is your office locked?" "Because it's my office, Raven." She tried to laugh, but it came out sharp. "Don't start that. You never locked anything before." "Times change." She dropped her bag on the counter. "What are you hiding? You're making everything complicated." I switched on the small device in my pocket, voice recorder running. "I'm not hiding. I'm protecting what's mine." Her tone rose. "You don't need to protect anything from me. I'm trying to keep you from messing things up." I didn't reply. Silence often cuts deeper than arguing. She huffed, pushed past me, and stomped down the hallway toward her old room. The argument fizzled out, not resolved, just paused, hanging in the house like leftover smoke. When she shut the door, I exhaled. The recording stopped. I tucked the device into my drawer, unsure whether I felt victory or embarrassment for needing it. The house felt smaller than earlier, as if the walls had taken a breath inward. I stepped onto the back porch and let the screen door ease shut behind me. The yard hadn't changed since my wife and I tended it together. Same fading fence, same patch of wild mint near the corner, same swing I'd promised to fix years ago. I sat on the edge of the steps. Grass brushed my shoes while I tried to slow my thoughts. The air smelled faintly of the neighbour's barbecue. Nothing dangerous lived in that scent, yet tension still clung to me. Losing trust in your own home does something strange to your heartbeat. Makes it skip for reasons you can't explain. My hands rested loosely on my knees. I caught myself glancing toward the kitchen window, half expecting movement behind it. Raven was somewhere inside, probably sorting through conversations we hadn't finished. She'd come back tomorrow with new arguments, new lines rehearsed to sound like concern. I rubbed the back of my neck, letting memories drift in. My wife used to sit beside me in this same spot,
pointing out shapes in the clouds just to make me laugh after long work days.
Those evenings were warm, steady, full of a rhythm I trusted.
Tonight held none of that. I rose and walked farther into the yard, kicking a stone out of my path. The weight in my chest didn't fade. It shifted, settling deeper but clearer. Something was building. Something I hadn't named yet. When the porch light clicked on behind me, automatic timer, I knew it was time to head inside. Raven arrived before noon, walking fast enough to rattle the porch boards. A man followed her, thin, grey suit, expression carved from stone. She didn't bother with greetings. "Dad, this is Attorney Walden. We're starting the process for temporary guardianship since you refused to cooperate with basic financial safety measures." Her tone didn't wobble. Mine almost did. "You brought a lawyer to my house without telling me." Walden stepped forward, already opening his folder. "Mr. Carter, this is a standard petition. Your daughter is concerned for your well-being."
"We only need your signature to begin the protective review." I stared at the page he slid toward me. Words like incapacity, supervision, evaluation floated near my thumb. Something in me cooled instantly. "I'm not signing anything. Not today, not later." Raven threw her hands up. "This is exactly why we're doing this. You can't keep ignoring reality." Her voice carried across the yard. A couple walking their dog paused on the sidewalk. The husband nudged his wife, whispering something as their eyes drifted toward us. "Raven, lower your voice." "Why?" she snapped. "The whole neighborhood should know you're refusing help." The sting didn't come from her words. It came from the way she wanted them heard. Walden closed his folder with the finality of someone who had expected this. "Very well. The court can proceed without your consent. It will simply take longer." They turned, as if leaving settled the matter. A metallic ping sounded from my phone moments later. An alert from the bank. I opened it while they stood on the walkway. A large withdrawal. Too large. Not mine. I called the bank immediately. The representative greeted me with forced cheerfulness. "Oh, yes, Mr. Carter. That transaction was authorized through the secondary manager on your account." "There is no secondary manager," I said. "Remove them now." Before she could respond, Raven stepped closer and raised her voice loud enough for the phone to pick up. "Dad, stop confusing them. I already told the bank you're having trouble keeping track. Let me talk." She reached for the phone. I pulled it back and covered the receiver. "This isn't your conversation." "It is," she said, her chest rising sharply. "Someone needs to clean up the chaos you've created. The neighbor across the street stopped watering his lawn. Water kept spilling over the bucket as he watched us." My reputation, something I'd guarded through decades of work and community, thinned like smoke in front of strangers. The bank representative, hearing Raven's voice, asked gently, "Mr. Carter, do you want to designate your daughter as your agent? We can." "No. You talk to me. Only me." But Raven leaned closer and said, "He gets mixed up sometimes. I can clarify anything." The representative apologized for the confusion and suggested I visit in person. The call ended unsatisfyingly, leaving a sour taste behind. Walden and Raven walked back to their car, confident that the ground beneath me had shifted. Maybe they were right. Something had shifted, but not in their favor.
Inside the house, the walls felt narrower. I shut the study door and leaned against it until my heartbeat steadied. For the first time, I sensed something slipping from my hands. Something real and measurable. Not respect, not rumor. Money. Control. Identity. I checked the bank app again. The missing amount stared back at me, undeniable. My palms pressed against the desk until the muscles in my arms tightened. The world didn't swirl or blur. It sharpened. Every doubt, every whisper from family, every concerned glance from neighbors. This was the consequence. A lie repeated long enough becomes a truth people obey. I opened my closet, grabbed my coat, and left the room. The air inside felt too tight to breathe. On the way out, I passed the family photos lining the hallway. My wife's smile followed me, warm, but distant, as though she was watching something she couldn't interfere with. I stepped into the yard and pulled the coat around my shoulders. A breeze drifted through the branches, brushing my face with the faint scent of early spring. I walked toward it, needing the open space to clear the pressure building behind my ribs. My hands slid into my pockets as I kept moving, not sure where I was going, only certain that staying inside that house would crush the small steadiness I had left. The phone rang while I sat at the kitchen table, trying to make sense of the withdrawal from the day before. The number belonged to Harold, one of my late wife's closest friends. We hadn't spoken in months. His voice carried a strange tension. "Ray, someone reached out to me asking about Linda's will. Wanted to know if the original ever got updated after she passed." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Who asked you?" They didn't give a name, just said they were handling things for you. A slow, cold understanding settled in. Raven had taken every folder from my bedroom without hesitation. She touched documents that belonged to both me and the woman I buried. Now she was reaching beyond the house. "If anyone else calls you, Harold, send them to me." Of course, just didn't want anything slipping through the cracks. After we hung up, I remained at the table, rubbing my thumb across the grain of the wood. Small decisions, calling old friends, digging into wills, stirring rumors. She was stitching a story she wanted others to believe. I needed air. The house felt cramped, as if the walls leaned inward each time I crossed the room. I grabbed my keys and walked down to the neighborhood park. Angie was already there, seated on the bench where she liked to feed the birds. She glanced over when I sat. "You look worn down, Ray." "Just tired, that's all." "No, it's something else. People don't slump like that unless a line got crossed." Her words lingered. I didn't answer right away. "You ever think about whether you've given someone too much room?" I asked quietly. Angie rested her hands in her lap. "Love without boundaries? That's not love. That's erosion. Even good people will drift into places they shouldn't, if no marker tells them to stop." I bent forward slightly, elbows on my knees. "Are you saying I let this happen?" "I'm saying you've been carrying everybody's load since Linda died. There's a difference between caring and surrendering. Sometimes they blur." A couple jogged past, their laughter trailing behind them. I watched them disappear down the path, then focused on the small patch of grass by my feet. The simplicity of the moment made her words feel heavier. "I don't know where the line is anymore," I admitted. "Then draw a new one," she said. "Draw it for yourself this time." Angie's voice held no judgment.
just truth, spoken gently enough to be heard. That night I wandered through the house long after the lights were off. My wife's belongings were still arranged as she left them. Her scarf on the corner hook, her favourite cookbook tucked beside the toaster, the framed photo of our anniversary sitting on the mantel.
I traced the edge of that photo, letting the memory breathe. She'd never tolerated dishonesty. She certainly wouldn't have let anyone, family or not, manipulate the home we built.
The next morning brought another blow. A cousin forwarded me a social media post from Raven. Caring for an aging parent alone isn't easy. Wishing people understood how much responsibility falls on my shoulders. The comments overflowed with sympathy. You're a good daughter. Stay strong. At least he has you. I felt my chest tighten, not from anger, but from how quickly people accepted a story she crafted to paint me as a burden. Each reaction nudged public opinion further away from who I truly was. I closed the app and set the phone down. The house was too still. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed distant, like a reminder of how much space I'd lost inside my own life. I opened the drawer where I kept the few documents Raven hadn't touched.
Property records, an insurance policy, a handwritten note from my wife reminding me to keep the house warm when I'm gone. Everything else she'd taken. My hands steadied as I gathered what remained. A thought formed, not loud or dramatic, just firm. I needed someone in my corner, someone who wasn't swayed by tears or entitlement, someone who saw the difference between concern and control. I found a number online for a local attorney who specialized in elder rights. I didn't overthink it. I called. "This is Attorney Pierce's office," a woman answered. "My name is Raymond Carter," I said. "I need to schedule a consultation. Some things in my household have changed, and I need guidance." We arranged a meeting for later that week. I put on my jacket, slid the papers into a folder, and locked the front door behind me. The air wasn't cold, but I zipped the jacket all the way up anyway. A woman walking her dog nodded at me as I passed, unaware that something inside me had shifted. I walked down the street with my folder pressed against my side, not rushing, not hesitating. My steps didn't feel heavy or lost. They felt deliberate, like someone reclaiming a piece of ground that had slowly been pulled from beneath him. The attorney's office sat on the corner of a narrow street in downtown Atlanta, tucked between a tax service and the barber shop. Nothing grand, nothing meant to impress. Exactly what I needed. Attorney Pierce was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, sharp-eyed and direct. She shook my hand firmly, then motioned for me to sit. "Mr. Carter, before we discuss anything else, I need you to understand one thing. Control is easier to lose than to regain. What you do next has to be intentional." I nodded, gripping the folder of documents I'd brought. "I'm ready to do whatever's necessary." She opened a notepad. "Start with documentation. Record interactions. Keep timelines. Collect copies of every financial statement you can still access. And stop sharing information with anyone who might twist it. Including my daughter." She didn't flinch. "Especially your daughter." For the first time in weeks, something inside me steadied. Not hope, more like clarity. I'd walked around in fog long enough. Pierce explained how to protect assets, how to identify unauthorized access,
how to file a restraining order if guardianship was pursued under false claims. Her voice stayed calm throughout, never rising, never softening to offer false comfort. "You're not powerless," she said. "You just haven't been fighting." The sentence stayed with me long after I left the office. On my way home, I stopped by a small electronics shop. The clerk walked me through a few basic security devices, tiny cameras that blended into bookshelves, cloud storage that couldn't be tampered with, a drive that encrypted itself when unplugged. I bought more than I planned, but uncertainty made me thorough. Back at the house, I moved through each room with deliberate care. A camera went on the mantel, another near the hallway, a third in my study, tucked behind a framed certificate. I changed passwords, then saved backups of every document I could recover. Each task dulled the leftover sting of helplessness. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Thoughts rolled quietly, not frantic anymore, just steady and unwavering. Anger had cooled. Anxiety had thinned. What replaced them was a kind of stillness, sharp at the edges, grounded in purpose. The next morning brought the first sign something had shifted on Raven's side too. My front door latch sat crooked, like someone tried to open it with the wrong key. Nothing inside seemed disturbed, but the misalignment was clear. I tested the knob. It resisted, then gave. A chill crawled up my neck. Later that day, a message arrived from an unknown number. "What exactly are you planning, Mr. Carter?" No greeting, no punctuation beyond the question mark. I read it twice, then deleted it, and photographed the deletion confirmation like Pierce had taught me. Documentation. Always documentation. I checked the cameras. No alerts. Part of me wondered if the message came from Raven, or someone she'd pulled into this campaign she called help. The tone, however, didn't sound like hers. It felt distant, almost professional. Days passed in a quiet rhythm. I watered the plants, cooked simple meals, sorted files, made lists. Each action chipped away at the passivity that had crept into my life. My daughter didn't visit, but absence didn't bring relief. Silence can carry its own warnings. One afternoon, after reviewing bank statements again, I stepped out onto the porch. Evening settled early, the kind that made shadows stretch across lawns. Neighborhood sounds drifted in. The rattle of a garbage can, a car door slamming, a dog barking somewhere down the block. I leaned on the railing and let the air fill my lungs. The tension didn't choke me now. It sharpened my senses. Something was approaching, not physically, not yet, but the rhythm of events tightened like a rope pulled from both ends. Someone wanted control. Someone expected me to fold. But the stillness inside me wasn't surrender. It was readiness. The porch boards creaked under my weight as I shifted my feet. A faint gust brushed past, carrying the smell of someone's dinner from a few houses away. Small, ordinary details that reminded me life continued around me, even while mine braced for impact. Across the street, a figure paused under a street lamp. Hard to tell who it was from the distance, but they hesitated long enough to draw my attention. When I looked directly, They moved on quickly, almost too quickly. The sky dimmed another shade. I stayed on the porch a moment longer, hands resting loosely on the railing. The wind tugged at the edge of my coat. A single porch light clicked on across the neighborhood. I stepped back toward the door, not rushing, not lingering either. Whatever waited ahead would show itself soon enough. The knock came late in the afternoon, too firm to be friendly. I opened the door and found Raven standing with 2 officers behind her. Her chin lifted with the certainty of someone who had already rehearsed the story she planned to tell. "Dad, they need to speak with you," she said, stepping aside as if the doorway no longer belonged to me. One of the officers offered a polite nod. "Mr. Carter, we received a wellness report claiming you may be in distress or unable to manage your safety. We're required to check on you." My eyes moved from him to my daughter. "You filed that report?" "I tried calling you, but you ignored me," she replied. "The neighbors said you've been acting confused. I'm just trying to stop something bad from happening." Her tone wavered between concern and accusation, blending into something practiced. The officers watched quietly, waiting to see whether I confirmed or disproved her claims. "I'm fine," I said. "Nothing here requires police involvement." Raven stepped closer. "Tell them you lost your keys this morning."
Tell them you forgot your appointment. Tell them, stop, I said sharply. The officers exchanged glances. One asked, "Sir, is there any reason your daughter would believe you're unable to care for yourself?" "Yes," I answered. "She wants control of my accounts." Raven gasped indignantly. "That's not true. He blocked me from his office and changed all the locks. He's paranoid and he's hiding things. I'm scared he could hurt himself." Her words built a story faster than I could dismantle it. Not lies, crafty distortions shaped to sound like responsibility. One officer approached the hallway. "Mr. Carter, we need to make sure you're safe. Could you show us your living space?" The request wasn't unreasonable, but the implication tightened something deep in my chest. I stepped back and allowed them through. The 3 of them walked my home like it was an exhibit, opening doors, glancing at clutter, asking questions in soft, almost patronizing tones. "Do you take medication? When was your last doctor's visit? Who helps you with groceries?" I answered each question steadily, watching Raven from the corner of my eye. She folded her arms and nodded solemnly, as if witnessing a tragedy unfolding. One officer asked, "Do you mind showing us your bedroom?" Before I could respond, Raven reached toward my keyring. "He misplaced his spare key. I should open it." "Don't touch my things." The firmness in my voice stopped her hand mid-air. The younger officer cleared his throat. "Sir, we only need to confirm everything is in order." I unlocked the door myself and let them look around. They didn't linger long. The room, neat and quiet, offered nothing to support her report. Still, damage had already formed elsewhere. When we returned to the living room, one officer spoke gently. "Mr. Carter, based on what we've seen, you're not in immediate danger. We won't be filing an involuntary report." Before relief could settle, he added, "But we do recommend follow-up assessments, considering the concerns raised." Raven seized the moment. "See? Even they think you should get checked. Dad, please, let me help before things get worse." I held her gaze, searching for one sign, any sign, that the woman standing here was still my daughter. If it was there, It hid well. The officers excused themselves, leaving a thin trail of polite apologies. Their patrol car pulled away slowly, wheels crunching against gravel. The house fell into a thick silence once the sound faded. I walked to the kitchen table and sat down. Not heavily, just deliberately. Raven circled me, like someone inspecting a fire she wasn't sure had gone out. "This is your fault," she whispered. "If you'd just signed the guardianship papers, none of this would have happened." "Get out," I said quietly. Her eyes widened. "What?" "Go home, Raven." "You can't push me away. I'm the only one trying to fix this." "Leave." There was no shout, no anger, only exhaustion settling deep into my bones. She grabbed her purse, muttering something about not letting me destroy myself, then stormed out the front door, letting it slam behind her. When the echo died, I sank back in the chair my wife once used, the one she rocked in during long phone calls with her sisters. My hands rested on the armrests, fingers tapping slowly as my breath tried to find a rhythm again. The humiliation lingered, not because strangers walked through my home, but because they treated me like someone who no longer had a say in his own life. Even worse, they believed the person who stripped that say away. My eyes drifted toward the bookshelf, where a tiny camera blinked its faint blue light. I'd forgotten it was there. That single pulse steadied me more than any reassurance could. Evidence existed. Truth existed. I rose from the chair, not with energy, but with certainty. The room no longer felt like a place to collapse. It felt like a place to gather strength. I walked toward the hallway, catching myself exhaling as I moved, letting the tension spill out in slow, controlled waves. The house stayed quiet the next morning, but it wasn't a peaceful quiet. It felt like the pause between two thunderclaps. I sat at the table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, when a small notification blinked on my phone. An alert from one of the tiny devices I'd set up around the house. The latest recording had finished uploading. I opened it and listened. At first, only muffled footsteps. Then Raven's voice, sharp, impatient, speaking to someone on the phone. "He's dragging his feet," she said. "The lawyer wants everything ready before he signs. Wants to how..." A pause, a huff of annoyance. My thumb hovered over the stop button, but I couldn't press it. Hearing my daughter refer to selling the home her mother cherished. Oh. The recording ended with a rustle, followed by my own front door close. I set the phone down carefully, almost too gently. The urge to slam it, shout, or march to her house didn't rise. Instead, a tight, controlled heat settled beneath my ribs. A glow. I forwarded the audio to Attorney Pierce with a brief message. "Found this." Her reply came within minutes. "This is significant. Do not confront her. Bring everything you have to the office tomorrow. We're close, mister." I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. Rage wanted space, but discipline crowded it out. I'd learned long ago, during my years supervising younger officers at the precinct, that the loudest man in the room usually lost. Strength lived in restraint, especially when the strength. By evening, Raven had launched another wave online. My cousin texted me screenshots without comment.
Caring for someone unstable isn't easy.
Some of us have to make painful decisions to protect our loved ones. Please pray for my dad. His mind is slipping, and he refuses help.
Dozens of comments poured in, stroking her ego, praising her sacrifice. You're doing the right thing. He's lucky you're stepping in. People don't understand how hard elder care is. I scrolled through them slowly, feeling my face grow warm, not from shame, but from how freely strangers granted her sainthood for a role she invented. I closed the phone. I refused to let strangers' opinions disturb my focus. Later that night, Pierce called. I went through the audio, she said. There's more here than reckless talk. She indirectly admits intent to liquidate your assets without consent. Combined with the guardianship attempt and the unauthorized withdrawal, this is substantial. I waited as she shuffled papers. And there's something else.
I pulled the metadata from the copy of your wife's will that your daughter submitted in one of her filings. It's incomplete. A page is missing, one that names you as the sole executor. Someone removed it before scanning. A heaviness gathered behind my eyes. So she had the original. At some point, yes. And she made the mistake of uploading a version altered from the original template. That's her weakness. She moves fast, cuts corners, and assumes no one's checking. Her tone remained composed, but there was confidence in it now. We can use this. Prepare yourself. Court won't be gentle, but you're not walking in unarmed anymore. After we hung up, I walked to my study. The air felt different. Not hostile, not comforting. Just honest. The desk lamp cast a glow across the stacks of folders I'd organized. I rested my hand on them, feeling the weight, the proof, the truth I'd fought to preserve. My wife's photo sat in its usual place. I touched the frame, not seeking guidance, just acknowledging how far things had fallen since she left. A low hum came from one of the security devices as it uploaded another backup. The steady sound grounded me. Evidence didn't lie. Feelings could blur, memories could shift, but facts held firm. I gathered the documents I planned to bring to the meeting, bank statements, the recording log, the altered will copy, my own handwritten notes. Stacking them into my folder felt like assembling armor. Tomorrow wouldn't be the final battle, but it would be the moment I stopped playing defense. I closed the folder, slipped it under my arm, and turned off the desk lamp. The hallway was dim, quiet, except for the faint hum of appliances settling for the night. I moved through it slowly, steady steps, the kind a man takes when he knows exactly where he's heading. The courtroom in Fulton County carried that familiar hush people get when they expect a spectacle, but pretend they came for justice. I sat beside Attorney Pierce, hands folded, breathing slow. Raven stood across the aisle with her lawyer, polished and confident, greeting people like someone attending a charity luncheon instead of trying to take her father's life apart. The judge entered. Everyone rose. My knees felt steady, not strong, not weak, just certain of the weight they carried. Raven's attorney started first. Your Honor, we present evidence that Mr. Raymond Carter is no longer able to manage his personal or financial affairs. He walked the court through their narrative. Missed bills, confused conversations, erratic behavior. People nodded, not maliciously, just easily persuaded. Stories about aging men fall into place so quickly in some minds. Then Raven took the stand. She dabbed her eye with a tissue before speaking. I love my father, she said softly. but he hasn't been himself. He forgets where things are. He locks himself in rooms. He accuses me of stealing from him. I'm scared he'll hurt himself or fall victim to someone who wants to take advantage. Her voice cracked just enough to feel planned. The judge looked at her with concern. The gallery leaned forward. I watched, silent, listening to the child I once carried on my shoulders describe me as a burden she heroically endured. Then came the part that pierced old wounds. Raven's lawyer said, "We also present psychological statements noting signs of cognitive decline, consistent with unresolved family trauma and years of emotional absence during his daughter's upbringing." The words hit something deep. The years I'd worked long shifts, missed birthdays, chosen duty over dinner tables. They twisted truth into a weapon sharper than lies. A small murmur passed through the courtroom. Pierce leaned toward me. "Don't react. Let them finish unraveling themselves." When Raven returned to her seat, her attorney gave a theatrical sigh. "Your Honor, this is why she seeks guardianship."
Not to take anything, but to protect him. Protect, a word she used like a shield while stabbing. Then came their final accusation. "We have reason to believe Mr. Carter has grown paranoid and is fabricating claims of manipulation." Pierce touched my forearm, our signal. My turn. She stood. "Your Honor, the defense would like to present a short video clip for the court's review." The judge nodded. The lights dimmed slightly as the screen flickered on. A familiar room appeared, my living room. Raven's voice filled the court, crisp and unmistakable. "He's dragging his feet. Once the house is listed, we can divide the assets before he signs anything. Don't worry, he won't even know." Her lawyer's voice followed. "Make sure the will page with his executor rights stays out. If the court sees it, this gets messy." Raven responded, annoyed. "I already pulled it. Just handle the listing." Gasps rippled across the room. The judge's pen froze mid-air. Pierce let the silence stretch before saying, "This recording was taken legally inside Mr. Carter's home, after his daughter repeatedly accessed his property without consent. The altered copy of the will, the attempted financial transfers, the fabricated wellness report, all corroborate a coordinated effort to seize his assets under the guise of care." The judge's expression hardened. Raven lurched to her feet. "That's taken out of context. He tricked me. Her voice cracked into a shriek. Her attorney tried to hush her, but she shoved his hand away. "He's lying. He's always been negligent. You think he deserves everything after abandoning us?" Abandoning. Another twist of the same blade. The judge struck the gavel once. "Miss Carter, sit down. Now." But she was spiraling, grasping at accusations, contradictions, explanations that collapsed under their own weight. "He's old. He doesn't know what he's doing. I was trying to help." No one believed her anymore, not after the recording, not after seeing the will comparison Pierce presented, not after hearing her own voice outline a plan to dismantle the life I'd built. When the judge restored order, she spoke clearly. "The guardianship petition is denied. All financial access by Ms. Carter is to be revoked immediately. Further investigation into fraudulent intent and document tampering will proceed." Raven's face drained of colour. Her attorney leaned back slowly, defeat written across his posture. I didn't look at her again. I rose, buttoned my coat, and walked down the aisle. The courtroom buzzed around me, whispers, shifting feet, papers rustling, but none of it touched me. My steps felt neither heavy nor triumphant, just steady. Outside the doors, the hallway stretched quiet and long. I kept walking,
the echo of my shoes marking each small reclaiming of myself. When the cold air finally met my face, I drew a slow breath and let it settle deep, the way a man breathes after resurfacing from a very long dive. Then I pushed open the exit and stepped out without turning back. The paperwork restoring full control of my accounts arrived 2 weeks after the hearing. A short letter, a few stamped forms, and the simple confirmation that everything with my name on it was mine again. No celebration followed, just a calm breath as I slid the documents into a drawer. News travelled fast. Pierce called to tell me the state had opened an investigation into elder exploitation and fraudulent filings. Raven's lawyer faced scrutiny too. I didn't ask for details. Consequences didn't need an audience. I moved out of the house soon after. The place held too many echoes, some good, some bitter, all tangled. A modest apartment near Piedmont Park suited me just fine. The first thing I unpacked was my wife's photo. I hung it on the wall above a small bookshelf, not as a shrine, but as a touchstone. Something steady in a life that had shifted more than I'd expected at my age. Afternoons became quiet routines. I walked the park path, watching joggers weave around couples pushing strollers. Sometimes Angie joined me when she happened to be in the area. We didn't talk much about what happened. She had a talent for knowing when silence did more good than questions. I stopped replaying the courtroom scene in my head, stopped hunting for the moment my daughter crossed the line from worry to hunger. Some answers don't soften anything. They just keep wounds open. I chose to let the questions drift. One morning, a thick envelope from the county prosecutor appeared in my mailbox. Inside were updates on charges, document tampering, attempted financial coercion, abuse of a vulnerable adult. My name appeared several times as the protected party. Seeing it in print felt strange, like reading about someone who shared pieces of me, but wasn't entirely me. I folded the letter without finishing the last page and placed it in the bottom drawer of the desk. Let the system carry it forward. I had no interest in watching every turn. Justice didn't need me standing beside it, holding its hand. The apartment settled around me over the next few days. I learned the creak of the hallway floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the steady rhythm of pipes when the neighbour upstairs showered. All ordinary sounds, none laced with tension. Peace rarely announces itself. It just replaces the noise you didn't realise you'd grown used to. On a Thursday evening, I brewed a cup of tea and stood by the window while steam curled from the mug. The sun dipped behind the buildings, leaving a soft grey across the sky. I didn't think about the house I left behind, or the daughter I no longer recognised. The weight of those thoughts had worn itself down. Some people wait their whole lives for closure. I learned it doesn't arrive with fanfare or apologies. It arrives when you stop reaching for the version of someone who no longer exists. I finished my tea, rinsed the cup, and set it upside down on the drying rack. The action felt small, steady, final in a quiet way. The door clicked softly when I closed it for the night. No echoes followed, no footsteps behind me, no voice rising from another room. Just clean silence, the kind that doesn't demand anything or hide anything. I stood there for a moment, letting the stillness settle around my shoulders. Then I switched off the light and walked deeper into the home that belonged, without question, without challenge, to me. In the quiet of that new apartment, I finally understood something age had been trying to teach me for years.
Peace isn't what you find. It's what you choose not to carry anymore. I didn't win anything. I didn't lose anything either. I simply stepped out of a war that should have never been mine, leaving the wreckage to whoever needed it to feel whole. And as I sat by the window that evening, watching the city settle into its own rhythm, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness, not bitterness, just release. For the first time in a long time, my life belonged only to me, and that was enough.